Did we meet at his deal?
Yes, we did.
I said, I know I met him before, so I have to formally say hi. It's not part of the program, but I just wanted to mention, gosh, I've listened to that voice. You're the singer too, right? Haven't you written and sung? Because you sung that day.
I sing.
Yeah, or you sung that day, so thank you. So, well, thank you all. This is my third Rotary today. I did a presentation at Duval Rotary and then attended Seattle 4 where I'm a member, and then had talked to Roy earlier about doing this Rotary in the afternoon. So, but let me start out the way I start out every meeting and talking about a day that changed my life. It was September 29th, 1998. And I woke up, it was a Tuesday, and I woke up and I looked over in bed and I couldn't find my wife. And just about the time I was looking to try to find Dana, Connor, my 4-year-old, comes in. Where's Mom? I don't know. So we get up and we go walking down the hall, and Kyle, my 14-year-old, comes in and he says, where's Mom? Same thing. I don't know. We looked in a couple of rooms and then we looked downstairs and I can see her face down in front of the washer and dryer. And she's kind of crunched over, and we go rushing down there, and I flip her over, and there's all this stuff coming out of her mouth and nose and everything. We see something's desperately wrong. Connor starts crying. I said to Kyle, call the police, call the fire. Get everybody here. Within a few minutes, probably, gosh, I don't know, 15, 20, 25 people in our house just swarming. And they took her out and put her in the rec room and had the wires and tubes and those things like this. And anytime I speak to groups, and I speak a couple times a week, whether it's 15 or 20 or 200 to 500, whatever it doesn't matter. There's always, I know, a chunk of people that have been through this and know what this is like. And one of the things that I noticed is time loses all measure when you go through something where you're in shock. And this little fire lady about this tall, comes up to me and she says, Mr. Brooke, we've been working on your wife for an hour and a half, and we still don't have a heartbeat. Would you like us to continue? And in that moment of shock, I thought, I've never made a life and death decision in my life. And I said, no, you can stop. And she was dead. And as I went through that period and listening to Connor cry and watching our house just be filled with friends and the people that came over, what impacted me the most is about 2 or 3 days later, I walked upstairs. We had a small little deck. And I walked out on the deck. I just kind of looked out to the sky and I thought to myself, now I realize why people kill themselves. I remember having a little conversation with myself. I'm not going to do it, but I can see why people do. And when you go through something like that, and yes, the shock is for the first 2 or 3 days, whatever it might be, to protect you. As soon as that wears off, or when that starts to wear off, the realization comes in, this is not a nightmare you're living, this is your reality. And I'm looking at Connor, who's just 4, and I'm looking at Kyle, who's 14, and realize I'm going to have to be here for these guys, and I'm going to have to raise them. And what made the story somewhat compelling for me is that prior to this, I had had just an unbelievable litany of people pass away. My mom had been manic depressive and struggled with all these issues and so forth, and she died of cancer, and I was still in my 20s, pretty young. And then a couple years later, my father committed suicide. He was an attorney, and he was this big hotshot guy. I don't know what. Never really quite figured out what happened. I graduated from high school. 2 of my best friends died the night we graduated. A couple more friends in Vietnam. And it just kept going on, and I thought, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to figure out something here because I got to carry on. I was talking to Derek about some pretty neat things just a few minutes ago about how we approach our life and what's our viewpoint and how we navigate our way through. Well, as we're on this actual earth, I'm going to have to figure out a way. And at some point, which I'll talk about in a second, gratitude entered the picture. But I realized a lot of it had to do with how I was going to look at this. So when I do workshops, I do a lot of exercise. I'm just going to do one. It's going to take about 30 seconds, so don't panic. Doesn't mean you're going to have to come up front and talk, but I'd like you to all stand up for a second, because I want to talk about looking at something. So for those of you that, Roy, we were talking about getting the exercise, kind of stretch out. Take the right hand and send it upward and turn it in the clockwise direction. Now, I took my watch off, so I got to keep an eye on time. That's this way. So if anybody's not sure, look at your neighbor. That's clockwise. Okay, we got it? Get that nice stretch going. And then start bringing it down. Keeping it clockwise. Now bring it down. Keeping it down. Now about to your forehead, to your eyes, to your chest, and now about to your waist. Now what direction is it going? Counterclockwise. Very good. Did you say that? Very good. Thank you. You can sit down. So, how come it goes from clockwise to counterclockwise? I guess it depends on how we look at it. So, look at Greg. There's always, I must say, it's Greg, right? There's always somebody that, thinking, did I stop and go a different direction? I was talking to Kelly about doing exercises to help with things and stuff, but it's how you look at things. And so what I noticed along the way is Dana unfortunately had died of a prescription pill overdose. The speaker today was talking about prescription medication at Seattle 4. So it was very, very key for me to be at that. I go every Wednesday anyway, but it was really a very powerful talk. And I realized that we have to have coping mechanisms in this world, and it's a stressful world we live in, and it's death, and it's loss, and it's stress, and it's money, and it's financial, and it's divorce, and all these things. And yet so many of the coping mechanisms are negative. They're very destructive, and in many cases, they can kill you. And this one ended up killing Dana, and she was 38. And so I realized, what am I going to do about this? And along the way, a buddy of mine says to me, you ought to get a gratitude journal. I said, what is a gratitude journal? I don't really understand that. And I'll talk to you about this one in just a second. But I realized that I'm going to need to get some sort of method that's not going to involve booze or pills or coke or dope or crack or whack or all this nonsense that's out there. I read it on the very part of the lake that we're living in right now, Bellevue, Issaquah, Mercer Island. I read the other day, the most common thing now are these burglaries. The laptop is where it is, the money's here, the jewelry's here, and the place has been broken into. And guess what? The medicine cabinet's been stripped. Everything else is left where it is because people are taking all those types of things. So what I realized is that along the way, I'm going to have to figure out not only how to cope with this whole thing, but I'm going to have to figure out a way to get the fact that some people take longer than others. And as Connor, my 4-year-old, continued to struggle, I had all sorts of things heaped on me that I hadn't planned on. He was 4 when Dana died, so about 6 months later, he was really struggling in kindergarten. So I get him evaluated, and she says he's got all sorts of problems. He's got gross motor skills, fine motor. I said, his mom just died 6 months. Yeah, we get it. They were very kind of cruel about the whole thing. But we went through this whole evaluation, and I said, Connor, we just got to hang in there. And they told me, and then they evaluated me, and they talked to me. They wanted to know how I was as a dad, and I told them. And so we're all done, and so we live by Green Lake, and the lady says, you need to send Connor to the car. We need to talk to you. So they sit me down, and they said, here's what we're going to recommend, an occupational therapy, physical therapy, all these different things. And I said, well, that's good. I said, I will do the best I can, but his mom died. I'm struggling myself. I ended up almost losing a business I had, ended up closing it because I was so depressed and it was so tough to deal with this. I found out she had never gone to get the insurance money, or the insurance rather, policy, because you have to do the blood and urine, and she would have failed. So we didn't have insurance. And so I said, well, you know, let me tell you something. I was a pretty decent athlete, and I think Connor is going to be the starting quarterback at Roosevelt High School someday. She starts laughing. He's not going to be any quarterback. He's not going to play sports. He's not going to do anything. I walked back out to the car, burst into tears, couldn't stop crying. Connor, what's wrong, Daddy? I just couldn't stop crying. Even these 14 years, some odd years later, it still gets to me. But I said, Connor, you're not going to give up on this deal. And that's what I talked about, whether it's a gratitude journal or anything that you do, exercise, drinking water, the ways you can take care of yourself that are healthy. And we get so many people have passed on even since that day. So I thought about it with Connor, and I said, you know what, I'm going to be the best model I can be for you. And whether it's gratitude or sticking with it or never giving up. So he kept trying at baseball. That's what he wanted to play. And doggone it, he just couldn't hit. You know the tee? He hit the tee. The ball's right here. It doesn't even move. I don't get it. What's so hard about hitting the darn ball? But he kept trying. He kept trying. And then he couldn't run. He couldn't throw. Couldn't hit, as I mentioned. Couldn't catch. He's here, ball's over here. And he'd run back to the dugout, put his hands like this, and start crying in the dugout. Well, for those of you that are parents, you know you can't go run down to the dugout. His buddies are there. You have to just let it play out. So we kept sticking with it over and over again. And then we got to May 31st, 2005. And he was still struggling with Little League, but he still decided to play. So it was the bottom of the 7th. They were down 7-6. 2 guys on base, second, third, 2 outs. And guess who comes up to bat? And I can see him coming out of the dugout walking. Derek's going to appreciate this. So I go, can I just get a walk? Hit by a pitch. And the Lord's looking down. Oh, you picked this time to pray? Is this kind of, And ball 1, strike 1, ball 2, strike 2, full count. Next pitch comes, don't know how, rips it, goes right down the third baseline, just inside the bag. The guy from third comes in and scores. The guy from second rounds third, he's coming from home, here comes the ball. And they come together, the catcher catches it, and they all crash together at the plate. The ball pops out. And they won 8-7. And this entire team runs out to second base, puts Connor on their shoulders, and carries him off the field. I couldn't talk for an hour and a half. I had such a lump in my throat. We got home that night. I sat him down on the bed, and I said, Connor, it was never about baseball. It was about the fact he never gave up. He never did. And I held Connor back in first grade because he did struggle. And he's now a senior at Bothell High School, where we live. And he's the starting pitcher on the team now. And so he's listened to his dad talk a lot and knows a lot about this whole gratitude thing. And so what I really want to focus on the most is this gratitude journal. And what happened when this friend of mine said to me, you need to get a gratitude journal. I did what a lot of people did. I went to Amazon, I bought a gratitude journal. I thought, okay, well, I'll see how this thing works. And I bought it, and I just put it on the shelf, and it sat there for 2 or 3 months. And I realized that maybe one day I probably ought to write in this thing. And I started writing in it, and this is my own that I published, and it was on Amazon. It's called the Brooker's Daily Gratitude Journal. But I started out with another one. And I started writing it every day, and I started seeing these amazing things happen. And again, it wasn't through drinking, it wasn't through drugs, it wasn't numbing the pain, because life can be a you-know-what. It was just this belief in refocusing and reframing everything in our life that's positive and everything that's good. We focus so much on what we don't have versus what we do have. It's amazing. I do this video, Roy was talking about it, and I'm going to do a drawing for a book here in just a few minutes. And I send out this video every Monday about 9 or 10 o'clock, I should say. And people, well, how do you come up with all these different ideas? I've got 250 on there now. You mean there's a limit to how many things you can be grateful for? One day it was called the furnace because it was cold out. And I just liked the fact that the furnace was working. And I was grateful for my furnace. So as I noticed this, I started to see these things happen. And then eventually what I realized too, though, is that you have to decide if you're going to be the person that's going to follow through on something like gratitude, or if you're going to be the person that's going to consistently make an excuse. I've gotten so I really have a hard time with this sentence that starts with, you don't understand. We've all heard it, you don't understand. So I started this almost preaching, if you will, this 1 out of 20. I noticed when I was running Nordstrom stores and later Lowe's stores, it was always about 1 out of 20 people that did it. And there was 19 that just didn't seem to quite get it. And before Dana had passed away, she was in a substance abuse deal at Everett. Dr. Dickinson calls me and he goes, are you David Brooke? Are you Dana's husband? I need to talk to you about her situation. Sure, come on. He says, I've been doing this for 35 years, taking care of people with addictions, drinking, drugs, pills, you name it. And he says, see all those people out there? And you know what they do? I guarantee you, somebody in this room, if not more, have been affected by this. They try to tell you who's got the profession to make you feel good. He's a doctor. They're an attorney. He's a architect. Like somehow that's going to make you feel better. But it does affect anybody. Socioeconomic, young, old, black, white, heavy, thin, doesn't matter. He says, there's your wife sitting over there. I said, I can see her. And he goes, let me just tell you what the odds are. 1 out of 20 will make it back to a normal life. And of the 19 that don't, half of them will be dead in the next year. And she had died about 6 months later. So I really realized the 1 out of 20. And what I realized is that it just depends if you want to set your mind to it. And people tell me all the time, well, I don't really have time for the gratitude journal. I go, that's fine. I go, you need to do it every single day. Well, I write it in occasionally. Well, like, do you brush your teeth occasionally? Or do you brush it every day? And I thought about it, and I didn't get to meet everybody, but I try to always do this. I think it's Bob, because I saw his name, Jim, Bill, Derek with and I emphasize extremely unusual spelling on his name, which I've never seen before, Kelly, Terry, Greg, Roy, Craig. I don't think I met you. Did I meet you guys? I said hi to you. I didn't want to interrupt the stovepipe. And people go, oh, how did you do that? And I go, it's nothing fancy. It's not to impress anybody. It's to impress upon people you can do anything if you want to. And if you want to write in a gratitude journal, or if you want to remember names, you can do it. Well, that's easy for you, Dave. You're good with names. No, it's just a focus. So when people are looking for something that they really want to grasp onto, this gratitude journal will do it. And what I did is I like the ones that I found, but I decided to print my own, self-published and everything. And here's today's entry, Wednesday, 4/24. And just to give you, I know you can't see, but at least I'll just give you an idea. The way it takes 7.5 minutes. For those of us with these great stomachs, that's less than 8-minute abs. Thank you for laughing. So, Wednesday, 4/24/13. Daily number, very important, 1 to 10. 10 is the best day of your life, 1 is one of the toughest days. What that does is anchors how your day is going. On days that I speak to Rotaries, and I do again 1 or 2 chambers, Kiwanis, it doesn't matter, I'm usually a 9, 9.5, sometimes a 10. I get so fired up, and if even one person tells me I changed their life, and it's usually many more than that and different things, it just gives me just this juice I can't even explain. And so that's your daily number. You can go back and refer to it. Why was I a 4 or 5? Why was it an 8 or 9? But it keeps track kind of where you are. 2 quick lines on current events, special occasions. That's just so you don't have to have a diary. You can write, I went down to his deal, I met Craig, anything you want to, saw George Tolles. I had George on the video the other day. Yeah, which was really speaking to his deal. I'm so grateful for. This is kind of one of the keys right here. Just 4 or 5 sentences of what you're grateful for. Just whatever pops into your head. There's no rules or I can't say I'm so grateful for my health every day. I write it every day, how grateful I am for my health. So many people have passed away. I don't have any artificial hips or knees or any of this kind of thing. The highlight of your day down here. Just a quick sentence on what was the, most people write in the gratitude journal in the morning. So typically the highlights from yesterday. Some people write at night and they want to do it before they go to bed. That's fine. Connor, who is now 18 and is at Bothell High School, as I mentioned, still slips and calls me daddy every so often. And it just melts my little heart to see my 6'2" strapping starting pitcher say, "Good night, Daddy." And I can tell it's almost subconscious. That generally makes my highlight. A little quote on gratitude, and then something that's very important here is your gratitude intentions. I call it gratitude tomorrow. And what that is your subconscious mind cannot distinguish between what you think is going to happen and what actually happens. So you can program it to be grateful for something that hasn't happened already. And I had closed my business and I left and I went down to manage this real fancy bridal boutique downtown. I closed my business after Dana had passed away and had a really, really tough time because financially it was just really brutal with no life insurance or anything. It's hard to work. So I closed it and I went down and I managed this place. And one day this lady says to me, "Well, I don't have a budget anymore. Can we just make today your last day, or is tomorrow okay?" And I go, "Okay." So I was out of work. So I started writing in my gratitude journal on the gratitude intentions. It was July. I'm so grateful for the job I have that I'll be getting before the end of the year. Now I realize it's not a paper out you can go get tomorrow, so it's going to take some time. I was a store manager, so it's making some pretty good money. I kept writing every single day. I'm so grateful for the job I'll have before the end of the year. And I can show you the journal. December 30th, I get a call from Lowe's. Would you be interested in managing our Mount Vernon store? Sure. Thank you. You just made it by one day. I appreciate that. But I have example after example after example. And again, and the reason I talk so much about the 1 in 20 and bring that up, actually, let me just say a quick story. Because I always look at people and I want to go, "Craig, are you the 1 or are you the 19? Bob, are you the 1 or are you the 19? I just want to challenge people. It's okay. They all say guess what they all say? I'm going to be the 1. But the odds are kind of long. That's 95%. My employees would tell me this all the time. So I had this gal working for me when I had the detail shop. I'd left Nordstrom, started my own business, and built it up, this big fancy detail shop. I was going to make it into a chain, and then Dana died, and just, oh gosh, my life collapsed. Emotionally, mentally, financially, spiritually. It was really, really a struggle, and that's where gratitude, among many things, played a huge role, but really played a role in getting my life back on track. But I had this one employee, and she says, "I'm going to be the 1. She was always telling me, "I'm going to be the 1. She was a great detailer, and she said, "You watch." Well, she'd had kind of a tough life. I think maybe she'd been an exotic dancer, possibly been abused. I'm not sure. I just know it'd been tough for her. But she kept saying, "I'm going to be the 1," because I've been espousing this for a long time. Then she gets pregnant by one of the people in the shop. "I'm going to have the baby." She said, "I'm going to move to Texas and I'm going to have my baby." I said, okay. So she leaves, and I kind of forget about it. About a year later, I get a call, I answer the phone, and it's her. And she goes, I just want to let you know I did it. I completely turned my life around. I said, well, Tracy, that's phenomenal. She goes, I had my baby. Remember I was pregnant? I said, yep. And she goes, I went and I moved back with my mom, and I had a little boy, and his name was John. I said, that's fantastic. And she goes, but here's the best news. I have a new man in my life. That's tremendous. What's his name? His name is Craig. Cool. What's Craig do? Well, he's on work release right now. And I just remember looking at the phone thinking, gosh, I hope it works out, but I don't know if work release is really going to be part of getting that life turned around, and we'll see. And later I found out it hadn't always gone as she had hoped. But the whole point is she was trying to be that one, and she was trying not to be the one that was going to be that part of that 19. And I, again, managed a lot of people in my life, and so it was interesting how many of them I found chose a path that was a lot easier. And it takes effort. Roy and I were talking about this with what his wife does. And we get this big, stressful life and the economy and all these things that just pound us. And I think, I can't even imagine being a kid today. Sex and violence and drugs and guns and all these different kinds of things. And we need these ways to help ourselves. And one of the things, and I've started to speak more and more to children now, but when I look at this and I realize how this can change a person, embracing gratitude, and this is why I do this video, and it's just that I do one every single day, and I send out the featured one on Monday. It's usually my favorite from the week. Just about some little nugget to remind you, if you reframe and refocus your life, how it can change you and how it can put it in such a better light and get away from this what we don't have mentality instead of what we do have too. So what I want to do is I want to quickly, I'm going to tell you about two of these books, and what I'd like you is if you can get out a business card, and I gave you all business cards because any referrals, I get referrals all the time, which I just love. But if you can take out a business card, and I'm going to do a quick little drawing here, if I may. And I've got two books I want to give away. But first of all, I would like to do two things. Is number one, I do this video. I send it out every Monday about 9:30. If you'd like to be on the list, great. If not, put an X on your card. I never want to send things to anybody that doesn't want it to get my videos. And then the second thing is I also do life coaching too. A lot of people I've met have really struggled, and I've really learned to help a lot of people along the way that said, gosh, I'm gonna need to figure this out because they're going down paths that are not good, whether it's food, whether it's booze, whether it's pills, all the things we talked about. So I still do a fair amount of life coaching, and I do a complimentary 45-minute consultation call if anybody would like that. So if you'd like that, put a C on your card, and I'm happy to do that. So Mr. Roy, would you be nice enough to collect the cards? And I want to talk about both these books, and then as Roy gets the cards, I will hand them out. Let's start with this one first. I'll save that one. So this particular book, I want to encourage people to, how many people here have ever done a video on anything? Video on anything? A couple of people. Craig has, Bill has. The reason I mention this is I started doing this video, and I really realized that if you do something for 2 minutes every day, 7.5 minutes for the gratitude journal, 2 minutes on a video, you can collect tremendous momentum. Derek and I can go out and walk down a half mile and come back and do a mile today, no problem. Be easy. But could he and I go do 365 miles on December 31st? I don't think so. I don't think we could walk to Portland and back. It'd be kind of tough. So I really realized the momentum. So what I did, and now I've got a bunch of them, is that I took the first 50 videos, transcribed them, and put them in a book. Because people want sometimes just that message. They don't just have to listen on video. So that's what this is. And it's Happiness Starts with Gratitude, 50 gratitude lessons to inspire you, direct you, and empower you. So, and then by the way, it won't hurt my feelings, but I always tell people, if you'd like me, I'll sign the book. Because I think that signature could be worth something someday, and people go, I'm good. I go, so I'm not.
It's sort of like getting that job.
Exactly. Yeah, and they go, you're not exactly John Grisham. And they go, you're not exactly thin. Anyway. Roy. See, I'm glad that I didn't have you pull that out. And then I'll get it. Now the second one, oops.
Did everybody get their card in?
Did everybody get their card in? Okay. The second one I want to talk about very briefly because this falls under the category of not giving up. Before I got a chance to write a book myself, and I've done a number of them, and in fact, I usually bring a lot of gratitude journals, and I sold them all out this morning at Duval, and I didn't have a chance to get back home, so I went down to Rotary downtown. But I sent in a lot of entries to different collaborative books, and just rejection. It's just like Connor in that baseball story. And this was called Ready, Aim, Captivate, and they wanted 60 to 70 authors, and you had to submit your story, and they accepted my story. And I sent in tons. And Deepak Chopra, Ron Danjanel, a bunch of really famous people, and there's yours truly right there in chapter 6. And it's just about gratitude, and mine is called, gee, this is going to surprise you, Live Life with Gratitude. Wow. There's my picture. So I was really proud of this book, and it was an international bestseller, too, on Amazon, too. So Greg Lucas, attorney at law. Gosh, what a golf clap. I'll tell you that. I guess that's kind of it. Anyway, all right. So finally, this is what I'd like to wrap up on, is a couple of things. Number one, thank you for listening to me. I'm extremely passionate about this message. I noticed today that I'm not sure I'm going to do 2 in the same day again, plus Rotary, because it like just takes the, you know what, energy out of me, because it's a very, to me, it's a very impactful story, and it tends to make a lot of difference with a lot of people. But also, any referrals, as I mentioned, please keep my card. I love that because I'm so fond of people that send me off to people. Well, we heard you did a talk and so forth, so I really, really appreciate that. And the last thing I want to talk about is something I learned, and this is why I was so touched to be part of Seattle Rotary number 4 and be part of Rotary. I do chambers, I do Kiwanis, I do Alliance, I do all this, I do schools. I went and did a prison. That was just unbelievable to see 16 and 17-year-old kids that they said, well, how many people have been in solitary? And I went, solitary confinement and you're barely out of high school? It just broke my heart. But even so, if I got through to a couple kids that day, it was worth it. But I realized service above self is Rotary. And somewhere after I got through the shock, I realized in order to save yourself, Dave, you're going to have to help other people. And that's really what I learned, is that the more people I help, the more ultimately I help myself. The best role model, here's Kyle, almost 29, and Connor, almost 19. And I've watched how they are. And I watched who their model was. And even though I had to get through the tragedy and not let it define me, it'd be easy for me to look at Craig and say, Craig, you don't understand. I've had it tough. And Craig go, yeah, whatever. That's a choice. You can go down the road and you can take a left or right. You can't keep going straight. You got to be positive or negative, in my opinion. But it's interesting how you watch them. And I watch Kyle and Connor. And if Connor was to come here right now, he'd go up to Roy and go, my dad told me all about you. I understand you work at Banner Bank. He says you're quite a guy. And he'd know, I understand your wife had some frustration with some of these people she's had to prescribe medication to. And you'd go, what is going on with this guy? But he saw the model. He saw how I was going to take a tragedy and turn it into a positive. So the sharing is such an important thing. So last story, actually 2 last things. When you go back and get in your car today, the next 10 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes, whatever, have you ever noticed the size of the windshield? It's about 2 feet deep, and it's about 4 or 5 feet wide. And then have you noticed the size of the rearview mirror? About like this. So that's kind of the proportion you want in your life. Mostly in the front. Keep a little view here. Blue lights, I get it. Pull over. But these people that are living back here and putting those obstacles from back there in front of them and bumping into them again are going to have a tough time.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And it's why the good Lord put your eyes in the front of your head, I think, as well. So the sharing piece, as I wrap up, is this. I learned how to fly. Very, very fortunate. I got my license in my 20s, and I've flown on and off since then. And one day I was down by Ocean Shore.